welcome to Let's Talk Medtech, the premier podcast for the medical device and diagnostic industry. My name is Omar Ford, and I am the host of the Let's Talk Medtech podcast. I'm also editor-in-chief of MDDI, an online publication that covers the medtech industry. On this episode of Let's Talk Medtech, we're going to be talking with Dr. Lishan Aklog. He is the CEO of PavMed and Lucid. This is his second time on the show, and we have an incredible conversation with him. And I've got to say that this is one of the most organic conversations I've ever had on Let's Talk MedTech. We just went for a free-for-all and just went off the top of the head, as they say. So it's an incredible conversation about his work in MedTech, his work in healthcare, but also what Lucid and PavMed are up to now, and also why the word audacity is a key word at his companies. And finally, we're going to talk about why diagnostic companies have a hard time securing funding. So it's just an incredible conversation. I can't wait for you all to hear it. And without further ado, let's talk MedTech with Dr. Lishan Aklog. Well, welcome to Let's Talk MedTech. And first of all, I don't even need to say welcome. I have to say welcome back because it's been a couple of years. I think when we talked last time, my hair was a little bit darker. I wasn't wearing the specs, and I didn't have a miracle baby. Can you believe it? My wife and I had a baby at the age of, I'm 47. So we've got an 18-month-old. So, yeah.
No, that's great. Congratulations on that. That's amazing. And I wasn't going to say anything about but you look more sophisticated. I was going to say
got a little more salt in there, a little more salt.
The salt and pepper. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
No, it's great to be back. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So what is new in your world? I know that there are things that have happened kind of with the setup of the companies of Lucid and PavMed. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that and maybe give an overview?
Sure.
So I think we talked in 2021 as well. I think that's when we talked. Yeah.
Lots happened, so I don't think we have time to go through each day by day. It's been a fun and exciting, challenging, but also rewarding few years. Let's start with Lucid. I mean, I think I've told my team, and I've said this I think on various other forums, that Lucid is definitely at a moment in time. We founded Lucid in 2018. We licensed technology, really groundbreaking, generational diagnostic technology from Case Western Reserve at the time, with the promise to have an opportunity to eliminate the scourge of esophageal cancer, one of the most awful cancers, and honestly one of the most awful diseases we have in this country. And we've been working our butts off over that period of time to get to a point that we are where we are today. So where we are today is that the EsoGuard molecular diagnostic test, which is performed on a sample that's collected non-invasively with the EsoCheck device, has been used in about 40,000 patients. We know just from anecdotal data and from published data that we are out there saving lives, but we operate in a commercial environment. And in that environment, in order for us to be able to put our foot in the gas and to really have broad access to this technology for patients, we need coverage. And that's the system we live and we operate within. And so when I say we're at a moment in time, we really are at a big inflection point here where we really do believe that Medicare coverage for this test, which will be the first test in this category to receive coverage, is really around the corner, that we're in the late stages of that process. And it's super exciting from a company point of view because we've been, kind of gearing up for this period of time. We have, from an operational point of view, from manufacturing of the cell collection device, the operations of the laboratory, the whole commercial process, the operational side of how you actually get the cell collection procedure performed. We've been kind of honing that for several years, and that's all ready to scale and ready to go. But we've been operating under a sort of low to mid throttle for several years now, as we've been building up a clinical evidence package to justify broad coverage, not just for Medicare, from others. And that's where we are. We have a big meeting coming up a week from Thursday. It's called a CAC meeting. It's being organized and hosted by the Medicare administrative contractors that operate under the MolDX program. It's in response to our effort to lock down this local coverage determination for this test.
Sure. Awesome. Lots of good stuff there. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it is, a lot of work to get there. There's clinical data that had to be collected. The evidence package kind of culminated by the end of last year. And it looks great. I mean, EsoGuard is, has really unprecedented ability to detect a precancer. Maybe I could brag a little bit about the underlying science and technology here.
Yeah.
We have, we're in an era of precision medicine. We're in an era where, the molecular tools that are available to us have done incredible things. Precision oncology, the ability to do genomic testing in anticipation of various kinds of treatment, minimal residual disease testing, where you can follow someone who's had treatment using blood testing as opposed to lots of imaging. All of that has, and obviously on the screening side as well, there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going on with blood-based testing. So, even within that paradigm and within that sort of ecosystem of technology, EsoGuard kind of stands out. We have a cancer here where you have to detect it in the precancerous state. Many cancers you can detect at stage 1. That's a victory. You can get 90% cure rates. That's not true with esophageal cancer. That's one of the really terrible things about it. Even if you pick it up at stage 1, it's got a 50% mortality. So you have to pick it up at the precancer stage. And the good news is that this test doesn't just pick it up at a late precancer stage. We can pick it up at the earliest precancer stage with the same incredible performance. 99% negative predictive value. So if your test is negative, you can be extremely confident that you don't have any of these conditions along the spectrum from the earliest precancer. That's really never happened before. You look at cervical cancer, for example. Pap testing is great, but as a molecular test, there's HPV testing, which is high, but there's no real test that can detect the precancerous conditions in the cervix besides just regular cytology. If you look at Cologuard, really great breakthrough stool DNA testing, extremely high sensitivity for cancer, okay sensitivity for advanced precancers, advanced adenomas at 45 to 50%, but no sensitivity for early precancers, the kinds of things that routinely get detected on colonoscopy. EsoGuard has 90% sensitivity and 99% negative predictive value across the spectrum, from the earliest, most subtle, just a little 1 centimeter patch, all the way through cancer. So great, it's great science. I love that part of it, and it's been great to be able to get it to market, and we're looking forward to getting patients broad access to this.
Awesome. How has that journey been as a CEO and just a leadership position? And let me frame that question a little bit better than that. I know when we had our conversation back a few years ago, being a CEO meant a totally different thing in regards to just coming out of the pandemic or dealing with the pandemic and supply chain issues and things of that note. But now we're in a new era and leadership has other challenges that they have to deal with. And I'm just wondering, how is it to lead now, to be in that position versus a few years ago during the early days of the pandemic? Yeah,
I think you're right. I think globally it's different. Across the board, we're in a different era post-pandemic. But for me specifically, and as it relates to this company, we're at a different stage. So it's been great. It's been a great learning experience. It's fun to kind of try to crack the code, in areas. My background, if you remember, I came from cardiac surgery. I've been active in medical technology, but it's more traditional Medtech, devices, interventional devices. Our first technology was a endovascular device to remove large blood clots and things like that. So the entire diagnostic space has been has been new for us going back 7 years ago. Initially I was reluctant to dive in here. It was only when one of my former colleagues from Brigham and Women's, who runs University Hospitals Cleveland, just kind of kept shoving this into my face and said, "This is once in a generation stuff." And we made the kind of somewhat audacious decision to say, "Okay, well, we're going to figure out how to be a diagnostic company." And we joke about it now because now we are, firmly entrenched in this world. Diagnostics is a tough space.
How so? How so? What
Yeah,
makes
it's very,
really?
yeah, it's very challenging. The markets have reflected that actually, as the capital markets have shifted a bit over the last call it 3 to 4 years. The main obstacles that we all face across medtech relate primarily to regulatory hurdles and reimbursement hurdles, right? I mean, I think it's maybe an oversimplification. Obviously, there's technology hurdles, there's IP hurdles, there's manufacturing challenges, supply chain. All of those are relevant, but a lot of that is sort of blocking and tackling and things that are within, at least somewhat within your control, right? The external factors that are less in your control, you could sort of put that into two buckets, and all of medtech deals with that to varying degrees, right? But a lot of medtech on the reimbursement side, gets sort of bundled in, to a hospital DRG, or there's some fairly, straightforward, hurdles you have to overcome. I don't mean to minimize that. I've been very active with PavMed on breakthrough device, legislation, and trying to make sure that pathways for innovative products get there. But it's particularly hard in diagnostics because, and I think harder than it really should be because, in the diagnostic world, I think part of it is that the infrastructure that's designed for traditional medtech, which is mostly interventional of some kind, you're like doing something to a patient, is not necessarily well suited for diagnostics, where you're just providing information, right? And so yes, there are risks in both directions, but there are very different types of risks than, let's say, some artificial heart or some catheter or something that where the risk of actual direct complication is more direct. So reimbursement's challenging. You have to really build up a substantial evidence base, not just to show that the test has clinical validity, clinical utility, which is a term that doesn't come up very often in traditional medtech, is right smack at the middle of the one of the bigger hurdles. Actually, you don't have to just prove your test works. You actually have to show that it actually is utilized in kind of the appropriate way, and you need published data and published literature to demonstrate all of that. So the bar is pretty high. The process is concentrated under a program called the MolDX program. This is complicated technical stuff, and it takes a long time. We've been working with Medicare for 5 years. On this. This is a culmination of 5 years of engagement with the MolDX program to get us where we are today. And that those challenges have translated into challenges in the capital markets. So we did a Lucid IPO in 2021. That was kind of at the tail end of the rah-rah, years before that, when capital was pretty widely available. 3.5 years after our IPO, we finally did our first true follow-on public offering. We've been able to finance the business from private investors and other folks who've been, betting on us, have been very loyal and supportive, and have kept us going. But we've been operating in a very tough capital markets for diagnostics as well as small caps.
Sure. I want to bring this up and see if you spotted this trend. But first of all, let me say this. It says a lot that you all are still moving forward, having secured the IPO when you did. I remember during that time, the special purpose acquisition corporation mergers, the SPAC mergers that were happening, companies going public that way. You had prescription digital therapeutics, PDTs. They were all going public through this route. And now when you look at it in 2025, those companies, they might have been formed in like 2018, 2019. They're not around. Or they sold their assets and they were in the digital health space, and they had great technologies, but reimbursement was an issue. And the other issue was, I don't think that the public was ready for that at the time. But now you have consumers, should I say consumers, patients,
Patients, yeah.
consumers
Yeah.
that are really
Okay.
plugged in, that care about their health, and they're more proactive. So they're
Correct.
coming back to the physician with their readings, with some of the stuff that they get from their Aura rings or their smartwatches or their Apple watches. And all they need is the education piece now. They need to know what kind of test they can get. They want to Google and look up the results before the doctor can even tell them, hey,
Yeah.
I've got my lab results. I looked it up. What does this mean? I'm saying that to say this. I think that there's been a shift in perception when it comes to patients versus consumers, and that also that the company has done well to really last the test of time, because there were a swath of new companies that came in and they couldn't get reimbursement. They went public and now they're gone. And I
Yeah.
think that says a lot about the company and how you've been running it, and the need that you're meeting. Yep.
I think you're right, and we'll take credit for that, honestly, because I think
Yep.
we have great technology. We have a great
Yeah.
story. None of this was sort of smoke and mirrors, honestly, from the very beginning. It was hard. We knew there were hurdles, but
Yeah.
the foundations were very, very solid. It's a $60 billion market opportunity. There's a 30 million patient target population that's well defined. It's already in guidelines. Just all of those foundational elements were definitely in place. Some of the shiny object stuff, like SPACs and things like that. Look, you look at all of that, but
Yeah.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day, some of that was a bit of a mirage, and we've been. I guess the latest is crypto treasury. There's some opportunities where people are looking at that, and we've been just pretty focused on the prize of just getting the data, keeping ourselves afloat, letting building a team, a stable of investors who've believed in us, who are really part of the Lucid family, and it's brought us to this point. Also on the banking side, we've had great banks, we've had great analysts who believe in the story, who've helped all of that along, and we have a great team. We have the greatest team in medtech, as I like to say, and just from top to bottom, a lot of expertise, a lot of hard work, and a lot of commitment.
Awesome, awesome. Now I've got to ask you this question, because I got so mad after our podcast a few years back, because I realized I didn't ask you about the incredible story that you had coming into healthcare, and everybody you talked to afterwards, you shared that story, and I was like, man, I totally missed that.
Yeah.
And can you talk to our audience a little bit just about your journey into healthcare, your personal journey?
Sure. It's been a great story. I've been incredibly fortunate. I've had opportunities. I've been fortunate to, have a little bit of willingness to take risks and to tack here and there in ways. So the journey's been has been around, kind of windy. It's been a windy road to get to this point. So I'll give you the brief background. I was born in Ethiopia. I came as a teenager, fled political violence there. I was going to be a physicist. That was I was this serious math and physics nerd. I worked at a Fermi lab in suburban Chicago in college, and I ultimately decided to follow my father's footsteps and be a doctor. He was the first cardiologist in Ethiopia, actually.
Yeah.
So even though I ended up in cardiac surgery, and I remind people they're not the same thing. Cardiac surgeons will always remind you of that. Just kidding. I spent 20 years in Boston, including a decade at Brigham and Women's Hospital, where I was a practicing cardiac surgeon. I did my training there. I was on the faculty there, and it was really all the way back in those years in the 90s. That was kind of the beginning of the minimally invasive boom in surgery, overall. Lap cholecystectomy came up in the laparoscopy, basically, for general surgery started in the early 90s. It started to move into cardiac surgery, and cardiac surgery just has a lot of technology, right? It's a very technology focused area. So even when I was a resident, we were very active in. I was very active in Medtech. I would go to all the meetings and go to join up with all the companies. In my early years, I was consultants for small companies, large companies, served on MABs. Just found all of that fascinating, and just found the opportunity to just always ask the question, like, why do we do it this way? Why isn't there a better way to do this? That was always kind of in my DNA. In the a little bit further along in the 2000s, kind of late 2000s, just found an opportunity with one of my surgical partners and another colleague to get into the start doing it ourselves. We had some ideas, and we ended up catching the entrepreneurial bug while we were still full-time practicing cardiac surgeons in Arizona. We founded an entity called Pavilion that spun out a company called Vortex Medical, which commercialized one of our, I hinted at this earlier, our first invention, which was a device called AngioVac. It's a big, large endovascular device. And they're large devices now, but back then it looked like sort of this gargantuan thing, but it was designed to allow you to suck out large blood clots, pulmonary emboli, big vegetations, things like that. And we took that from a PowerPoint and a very small VC round to FDA approval and commercialization in about 18 months. And we sold that to AngioDynamics in 2012. And at that point, said, yeah, it's kind of fun. There's a lot of, yeah.
I want to break in. I just interviewed the CEO of AngioDynamics for an episode of Let's Talk Medtech.
Jim Clever. Great company. I stole a bunch of his guys. So I have several people who work with me right now who are former AngioDynamics folks, and I still have I give talks there because I still have a hotspot. So AngioVac has become a great product. Yeah. It's become standard of care for tricuspid endocarditis, and it's just incredibly good. That was my point. It is very gratifying beyond surgery, or similar to the gratification of surgery, but on a larger scale. There's tens of thousands of people who've benefited from that technology. So after that, we founded PavMed, the parent company of Lucid. Moved to New York, gave up surgery full time. We did a very bizarre thing. We took Lucid public. We took PavMed public with like nothing, with just a bunch of, not a SPAC, a front door, little tiny $5 million IPO. And we started going to work to kind of build this long-term vehicle that could have access to outside technologies, could use our connections there and some expertise to bring them to market. We had a portfolio of products that we were pursuing when the Lucid opportunity came along, and we were well positioned, frankly, to tack towards that. That might not have been the case if we weren't a public company, because we had quite a bit of autonomy in terms of deciding what to do. It might have been different if we had been a VC-backed company, where my strong suspicion is if I had called our VC and said, we want to get into diagnostics, they would have said, what do you know about diagnostics? You're not, So we're very fortunate that we made this very kind of radical, contrarian decision to enter the public markets. The public markets are fickle mistress, so to speak, it goes in both directions. But we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars in the public markets. We've been able to pursue things. Some have gone well, some haven't, and we've learned a lot of lessons from that. There have been times when capital was tight and where we've stared into the abyss, and we've been able to get through. We've done rifts. We've kind of been through all of that. But here we are. We're still here. We're fighting. Lucid is in a great position. PavMed is in a great position because Lucid's in a great position. But PavMed has other things it's working on. It's got Veris Health, which is this cancer care platform that has an implantable device that's just around the corner. And PavMed is always looking at opportunities. We just announced last week this partnership with Duke University and UNC on a really cool, incredible imaging technology that combines OCT with an additional imaging technology that can detect dysplastic changes in the esophagus and allow them to be ablated on the spot instead of having to wait for biopsy. So PavMed is still quite active in its initial mission to try to bring in a broad spectrum of technology. So it's been a fun ride.
What would you say to someone who kind of comes to like a crux in their in their career, where they want to do something different, or they want to take it to the next level? Because from your story, it seems like you never settled. You always went to the next level, or you always zigged when you should have zagged. You didn't follow the straight line. That seems to be the theme in your story. But what would you tell someone who's quite frankly, maybe nervous about making that change, but they
Sure.
feel it. Yeah.
Yeah,
What would you say?
I think there was a word we used to use around the company that I've been banned from using because I use it so much, which is Audacity. It's
Oh,
they call it
that's
the my team calls it the A word. Oh yeah, there's Lishan with the A word, and it really kind of boils down to that. You kind of look, if not for everybody, right?
mhm.
I know people who've been successful transitioning from medicine into industry who've taken a completely different route. They go out, they get their MBA, they say, okay, by this date I'm going to do this, and by this date I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to, get a chief medical officer position at a Medtech company, and then eventually go off and maybe be a CEO of a startup. There's nothing wrong with that. That's completely appropriate and fine, and that if that's tailored to your personality. My personality was more like it was sort of what's in front of me. And I wouldn't say it's impulsive, but it's more, just focusing on, okay, what's the next opportunity? Well, that's really interesting. That sounds like fun. That sounds like there's an opportunity to really to do something and have an impact. But that requires some audacity, a little bit of like blind, sort of confidence, and a willingness to kind of jump into the deep end a bit. And I hate, people who know me know I hate all of the Silicon Valley terms, every single one of them. Make it till you break it or whatever, run fast and break things. I can't even.
Yes.
I despise all of those. So I'm nervous to talk to kind of use that kind of metaphoric language because it does require care. We're in an
Mhm.
industry that can't tolerate, where mistakes are not, you screwed up an app, with a bunch of birds in it. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
we've learned that the Silicon Valley ethos doesn't play here, but there's some elements of that. Just having a willingness to dive in, and you learn as you go. There is a bit of fake it till you make it. You show up in the public markets, and the next thing I know, I'm doing earnings calls and talking to analysts and trying to figure out exactly how all this works, how this all plays out. And you just have to have confidence that you can learn it, and a lot of it is just sort of the language and the lingo and understanding their processes and the ecosystem, and you just need to make it fun.
Yeah. I think the last time we talked, you said that you work 8 days a week and about 25 hours a day.
I work pretty hard. I think one of the great things about where I am today versus back then is that I've built this incredible. Honestly, one of the most two of the things I'm most proud about are the executive leadership team that I've built around me. I've got 10 direct reports, not
Okay.
50. I don't, the head of NVIDIA, Jensen Wong was talking about how he has 50 direct reports. I'm like, that sounds crazy. But I have 10 direct reports, and every single one of them is a superstar. And they
Yeah.
all have just, they work together well. That's made my job a lot easier, honestly, in terms of like the 8 hours, 25 hours, 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. And then there's a culture, the culture that we've built. We're at about 100 plus employees, and even after growing to that level, and hopefully, that'll grow substantially over the coming years, we've been able to maintain a culture, not of perfection, but one that has all the right, that's kind of rooted in all the right values of teamwork, family, focus on patients. Where no one's siloed, everybody is sort of, pulling in the same direction, and that's been fun to watch. So, yeah, my job's great at this point. It's very satisfying and very gratifying, and a lot of great things to come.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Dr. Aklog, thank you. Thank you for coming on to Let's Talk MedTech. Thank you for returning to Let's Talk MedTech. Really appreciate the conversation. Always love having you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's been great. Always enjoy it as well. Thanks, Omar.
That's it for this episode of Let's Talk MedTech. Thanks once again to our guest, Dr. Lishan Aklog, PavMed CEO. And if you are interested in the previous conversation that we had with Dr. Aklog, you can find that on Season 1, Episode 29 of Let's Talk MedTech. That's Season 1, Episode 29 of Let's Talk MedTech. And if you love this conversation and you like all things related to the medical device industry, please visit us at mddionline.com. That's mddionline.com for all of your medtech news. And finally, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the Let's Talk MedTech podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast.